All right. Welcome to another episode of A Podcast. Your host, Stephen Maxted. Today we have guest, long time waited, Jay Hall. Entrepreneur and creative is the title we have for you today. We were just discussing that before getting on here. I think it could be a few things. So first off, Jay, thanks for making time to be on here today. I know you're a busy guy, and now you're on the other side of the, I guess, kind of the the conversation. You run a very successful podcast here and spreading some good out on the web and everything else that you're involved in. So thanks for making time to be on. I'm excited to chat more today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it does feel a little weird. I haven't done anybody else's podcast in over a year, so it's a little weird. Yeah, but you take it, and I will just follow your lead here.
It'll probably flow pretty naturally with us, and we've been kind of crossing paths for a bit here, and obviously a lot of similar interests. And I'm excited to have you on and chat more about sharing your story, ultimately with what you've been up to, and maybe the podcast is a good place to start. With a more recent thing, but let's cover a few things today. But what made you get started in the podcast space specifically? What inspired that?
Oh, that's a journey. So when I was 16, I went to Shaw TV and I convinced them that they should put me on TV. I didn't have a cameraman. I didn't have an idea. Awesome. I didn't have anything. It was just me. They said, okay. And I found a cameraman who wasn't really a cameraman. He just lied about it because he needed money. And we did probably 50 episodes of just terrible TV. And then a sponsor came along out of nowhere. And I said, oh, maybe I should take this seriously. So I did that show, did 500 episodes of Def 11, which was the name of the show. It was all about hip hop in Winnipeg. And then that turned into another TV project called Club Life, which was basically me going into nightclubs and making fun of people that were drunk, which was a lot of fun. And had politics not derailed that journey, I probably would have continued, and that's where I would have gone. But I had to pick between my show and working in politics. So I chose politics at that time. And then during COVID, I did a podcast called Shit People Post, and that kind of inadvertently turned into like vaxxers versus anti-vaxxers podcast. Didn't mean for it to be. Yeah, it was a lot. And I stopped doing it because I was getting into such a negative headspace. Right. And then I met my now girlfriend, and she had, as part of her research into whether she should match with me, she watched one of the episodes of my podcast and said that she really loved it. So she was like, you should do it again. You should do it. And I was like, I don't know. And kind of wavered on it. And then I said, I want to talk about something that I'm really passionate about. And I went from being a very shy, bullied kid to being a DJ, to becoming a club promoter, to being stuck in this industry of lies and deceit and just horrible circumstance. And then I started on this betterment journey, and I've been through a lot. So that's what the podcast is about. It's called Better. It's about doing better, being better, and making the world a better place.
Awesome. That's I think it's so needed. We've talked about this a little bit off air though too, but in general, I know I had a cold a couple weeks ago, and it's an interesting journey when you're scrolling through whatever TV and whatever exists out there, and you're trying to look for something that's actually semi-positive. It's quite a struggle. Outside of literally watching Ted Lasso again, I think that there was like not a lot of options out there on all the streaming platforms that exist today. I think I was able to find like maybe one movie that was a little bit more positive instead of it being like action filled, and I understand they're driving emotion through that, but it was extra tricky to be like, everything seemingly was kind of negative. And I hope that, things like you're producing and other content going out there does become more positive. That's just my little adage. I think it's great that you're doing that and investing time and resources to help share good stories, better moments, as you call them, right?
I have better moments. Yeah, I have an episode coming up with TV shows and movies and books, 3 different episodes each that are kind of along that vein of things that can help you do better, be better, and make the world a better place. I say my slogan a million times every time I talk about the podcast. It is. And, it's unfortunate because, it's even hard to get your algorithm on social media to focus on good. I tried to train it, and it just keeps going back to the horrible stuff in the world. And I don't understand why they can't just let people be happy.
It's what sells, keeps us hooked on there. We're fear driven. I've heard a couple of clips about stuff. I'm not an expert in it, but there is some like reason behind, us being attracted to the fear, or knowing the fear, I guess. Ultimately, I think ignorance is bliss sometimes. I'd almost rather not know and kind of walk aimlessly. Like with that Denzel line from years ago, he was like, if you watch the news or whatever, you're uninformed. And if you watch it, if you watch it, you're misinformed, and you don't watch it, you're uninformed.
Yeah.
So being able to self-filter about like what's actually, important to you and has value ultimately, I guess, as I stumble through quoting a movie.
I scrub quotes all the time.
Something like that.
I in terms of negative content, I used to consume a lot of political info. Being that I spent a lot of time in the back rooms of politics for over a decade, and I got really really absorbed into that world, and I made a conscious effort. I think it was summer last year where I said, I'm going to build myself an AI, which allows me to get the news I need. And then I'm going to pair that with ground.news. And I was probably consuming 30 hours of political or, social issue based news. Now I'm doing it in about 2 hours a week. Because there's a lot of repetition, right? If you watch Rational National, Brian Tyler Cohen, David Pakman, you even veering a little bit to the right stuff with Tim Pool and that, just to get a different perspective. Really, it's a lot of repetition out there, just said differently to keep you hooked. So now I absorb one story one way, or like I absorb a story taking into consideration all the different viewpoints, and that's what my AI will generate for me. So I don't have to, go and constantly spend all this time. And it's really helped my mental health for sure. It has helped it.
That's fantastic. Well, it's tricky. I think a lot of people get sucked into that, right? They're watching whatever their fear-based algorithm is, and understanding that we don't all see the same thing is quite interesting as well.
Yeah.
Right? We get given different information in general, depending on what our algorithm is kind of pushing towards us or topics. And it's kind of funny to look at like the For You page on Instagram, for example, where mine is like dogs, people in fitness, and I forget what the other thing is. It's like then like new tech stuff or business, but other people's are very different. I was just talking with a friend the other day about what is on their like For You page, without being incriminating about what people look, but it's kind of funny to know, they're just so different, the things that are getting recommended. So
those algos, man, they're the thing I think that they leave out when they talk about them is that they weight them based on the content you view. But I do believe that there is a piece to every social algorithm that says, let's put like, I don't know what the numbers are, but 30% positive and 70% negative to keep them glued here. Whereas for someone like me at this point in my journey, that doesn't work for me. And it makes me tune out. Like I used to post all the time, and I was on social a lot. I'm not on as much anymore because the feed, I can't get the feed to work for my mindset now. And that's, so now I like I said, I built an AI to curate that for myself, so I don't have to turn to social for it.
Well, I'm sure not everyone's able or knows how to do that, but that's good that you're doing that. But I think in general, it's a little bit of a pattern in terms of like what we absorb or take in, whether it be healthier choices on like diet, but it's also what we're taking in up here, whether we're seeing, listening to it, podcasts that we choose to listen to or don't. We kind of have opportunities nowadays to decide to listen to what we want or what we should be consuming, which is great that you're making that an extra jump to filter through using AI to make that happen.
And I will tell everybody that it sounds built in AI. It sounds really impressive, but it isn't. And as long as you can, what I tell people is if you can navigate the web, how to use Google's suite of, instead of Microsoft Office, because I don't know anybody uses that anymore, but Google Docs and Google, if you can use Photoshop then you can build yourself an AI to do almost anything now. It's not as hard as it once was. It's really a WYSIWYG design. What you see is what you get. It's not a lot of coding. I mean, I took it a little bit further because I can code to some degree, but you could build an AI. Like, let's say you wanted to, let's say you love 3 sports, but you don't have time to watch them. You could build an AI that literally delivers you the highlight reels and a digestible 10-minute outline for every day for your 3 favorite sports. And you would always know what's going on. You could always catch the cool moments, but you would never have to dedicate hours upon it, which none of us have anymore to it.
Right. Yeah. If you're trying to follow multiple sports, that's like your thing, or multiple teams within, NFL is a good example. Folks said, we're on a pause right now. The season's over until next season kind of thing. But I mean, baseball has a very intense schedule. In terms of how often they play, like no one's taking in all those games. It's impossible.
Well, I will say this, sorry to cut in, but I have a friend, his mom, I think for 25 years now, has never missed a Blue Jays game on TV.
Wow.
And she watches it front to back. And I don't know how she does it, but it's just, I think about that and I go, how, I don't even know how I would even try to put it took Sean and I all winter to watch Yellowstone.
Yeah, a TV series that you can control, and you could totally binge watch maybe in like a big long weekend kind of thing, but you have other stuff going on.
Yeah, there's always something, so yeah.
That's pretty funny. Schedules.
Yeah.
Outside of that. Jay, let's take a step back, and I didn't really ask like how your journey got started, but can we go back to, what was a lot of entrepreneurs, I don't think that you're so different in this category. Like, what was an early entrepreneur moment for you where you knew, hey, like, I'm not going to be that kind of regular mold business kind of thing, or job wise? What did that journey look like for you?
I don't think it was a specific moment. So when I was younger, it's kind of funny because the beginning of my journey, although I'm not a billionaire, but the beginning of my journey starts very similar to Mark Cuban's. So Mark Cuban and I did the exact same thing in junior high and high school, except he did it with baseball cards. I did it with hockey cards. So my parents in grade 7, right, like end of grade 6 into grade 7, we moved out to the country, Sanford, Manitoba, and there was nothing around there. There was, it's a bit bigger now, but there was nothing in that town, and us kids didn't really get to the city much. I got to the city a little bit more than most, so I started buying up boxes of hockey cards and taking an X-Acto knife and cutting them open and taking all the cards out. And then I went around and I found out favorite teams, favorite players from people in my school. And then I would make sure and I would guarantee that, their favorite team or a favorite player was in that pack. And so I could charge them double what I paid for them. So that was probably my first entrepreneurial journey of sorts. And and what was interesting is I had more money than a lot of my friends at that time because of that. Even though they kind of turned on me eventually, we're like, wait, why are we paying you double? I'm like, well, I'm providing a service. I guarantee it to you. Right. But they didn't understand that. So that kind of died off. And then I got into garbage collection with my, really junior high girlfriend's, brother-in-law. And he was really that was probably the moment. He was an entrepreneur. He was going through school and university, and he ran a garbage collection business. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Went around the towns and collected garbage. He would get me up on the truck on this big board, and I would slam it down because we didn't have a compactor or anything. And I would notice that I was like, wait a second. He doesn't have all the complaints that my parents have. Like, oh, I got to get up at 4:30 in the morning to get to the city for my job. My schedule isn't my own. His schedule was always his own. And that was really appealing to me. And then when I became a DJ, that was when it fully cemented in. I was like, oh, if I could do this, if I could not necessarily DJ, because I was an okay DJ. I wasn't great. I knew I wasn't gonna be like a DJ Finesse or anybody like that. But I loved the idea of, I just the flexibility has always appealed to me.
Totally.
So that was really that was the catalyst for every entrepreneurial journey since, has been flexibility. And I basically, for years, I would throw a party, or I would do some entrepreneurial journey for a few months, make a bunch of money, and then go spend it all on an experience, and then come back and just do that on repeat, which led to a very cool life, but not the best long-term plan. So I'm in the long-term stage now.
I love that. That's super cool. And I think it's with those experiences, like many early entrepreneurs, they get exposure to kind of a different pattern instead of, we'll call it, uh, the traditional rat race, or the 9 to 5 kind of program that a lot of folks do fall into. And there's a lot of great opportunities and a great way to live a life. But I think for some folks, they get that experience and they're like, okay, this is for me. And that's super cool to hear how you got into that. Now, talking about experiences, I think this is a great segue. Fear is an experience all on its own.
Yes.
I have not experienced it yet. I will with this upcoming season that you have chatted about, and I hope that's okay that I open that up for us to talk about on here. But walk me through how that started and where it's at today. It sounds like such a cool thing. I do have some regrets that I was unaware of it or wasn't paying attention, because I feel like friends of mine have certainly attended this, because I've heard them talk about this thing. And until we met, connected, and I got talking more, and you were explaining to me at your office one day about it, I'm like, oh, this is it. Okay. Right. Like it kind of clicking, and for me anyways. But how did that get started for you? What's it all about? What is Fear?
So Fear is, we originally were trying to be the scariest Halloween experience. Learned along the way that you can't scare everybody, so we decided to be the most interactive Halloween experience. Essentially, what we do is we put every group that comes through into their own horror movie. So whether they are the character who is scared and dies immediately, or whether they are the character who, muscles through it and laughs through it and just has a good time with it. So it's kind of interesting, because if I just had Fear as an entrepreneurial journey, I would have experienced all the highs and lows of entrepreneurship. So I'll try to Cole's notes this. So year one,
sure,
it started because the venue Fun Mountain that I was working with them as their marketing consultant, and they had a really bad season because of all the rain. And we were sitting down to have like our post-season meeting, and they're like, we don't even know what to do. Like, we can't even afford, like, we're in a bad spot. So I said, well, you don't really use the park outside of summer. Like, what if you did that? So, well, what are you thinking? I said, I don't know, like maybe myself and, a couple of people, we could throw together a Halloween thing and see if that works. So like, okay, let's do it. And we released the video, and we released it 7 days before the first night, because it just, to get everything together, it just took a while. And we sold out, and it was bonkers. And people were like, and I didn't even really know what I was doing. All I knew is I liked to scare people.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was constantly pranking friends. We have videos from back in the day of like, we scared this one friend of mine so bad that she was crying for 45 minutes and stuck in place, so sometimes a little much, it's fine. It's all good fun to some degree. So we did it, and I have always had the acting bug, but I've never done anything about it. And so at the top of Fun Mountain, I was in this area that I'd cordoned off, and I was like, I had a zombie on the table strapped down, and I had a machine gun, and I was all dirty, and my clothes were it was like the height of the apocalypse. And I did this acting piece with this zombie, and then the zombie would get loose, and everybody, start breaking through the tables and everything. And people lost it. So I went, wow. Oh, I can't believe that people actually like this. This is a total Hail Mary.
Right.
So year two, we went to Adrenaline Adventures, and I played God that year, which was a lot of fun. Basically, it was like a Negan from Walking Dead twist on God.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Really, really fun. Year three, we did Adrenaline Adventures again. And I was just really testing things out as I went along to see, I love studying the human condition, and Fear really allowed me to do that. Then year 4, we did it at this warehouse on Jarvis, which we had 100,000 square feet of space. This was the big one. We did 28,800 people through the doors, 75,000 people on the wait list. Did not expect it to be that big. In fact, the first weekend we were a little worried because we just barely sold out, and then it just exploded. It just for some, it took a little extra time that year to catch on. And then I figured, oh man, this is it. This is what I'm going to do, right? I still had my marketing agency, so I moved my marketing agency into the warehouse. I took out a gigantic loan, like we're talking massive, and I just went to town building sets and just doing what I wanted to do, because I wanted to do 100,000 people through the doors in 2019. And we were getting close to being done the setup, spent all the money, and the warehouse burnt down.
No.
Yeah. And to make matters worse, all the tenants of the building were sold fake insurance as a scam by the owners. And none of our insurance was valid. I lost everything. My whole business was in there, my marketing business, plus this gigantic loan I spent. So now I'm carrying this huge loan payment, and for nothing, right? It literally, I lit that money on fire. So that was fun. To put in perspective, the night before we just had $45,000 worth of wood delivered. Like it just a match, right?
That's crazy.
Yeah. So I'm depressed right off my ass, right? So I feel, I'm like, you know what though, I'm not gonna let this beat me. I never let stuff beat me, so I'm just gonna keep going. And then I'm like, 2020, we're coming back, baby. And then COVID hits, and that derailed that. And then I went, this is just, what's going on here? Why can't I can't gain footing? So now I'm carrying this giant loan. I've got my business going, and now I have I'm full into event management and a ticketing platform called Incredivent. And in 2021, I did it again. The province only allowed me to have 5,000 people. I did it. 5,000 people came through, and that was the year we perfected Fear. It was good. We had to build a panic room. Actually, this podcast studio, we had retrofitted it into a panic room that had like nice music and a nurse and all this stuff, so people that had panic attacks or just couldn't go through it, they could have a place to go. So that was wild. And then the problem I had was people were really hard to deal with coming out of COVID. And it really just, I got to the point where I couldn't handle the event coordination side of it because of that. And so I just set Fear aside. I said, you know what, I sold it off in a very strange deal, by the way. If you ever want to get into the worst negotiations of all time, that deal was the oddest deal I've ever been a part of. And then I said, you know what, I'll never do it again unless the perfect venue presents. And one day my uncle calls me out of the blue and says, hey, do you still do Halloween? I said, well, no, but I've always been looking for the perfect venue. And he goes, I've got it. I said, what do you mean you've got it? So I'm not going to say what it is because I don't want to yet, but I literally walked in there, and one floor is Resident Evil, another floor is The Walking Dead, another floor is Silence of the Lambs. It is
awesome.
I sent in 2015 when we started, I'd sent a list of what I would want in a perfect venue to somebody, and they sent it back to me this year and said, this venue's got all of it. You found it. So, and it was in the family the whole time. Who knew?
That's too funny. Right in front of you.
Yeah, right in front of me. So, and that's how entrepreneurship generally does go is, you're so razor focused on trying to do something amazing. And sometimes you end up with these blind spots, right? And a blind spot was I didn't think to ask my uncle who owned one of the biggest places in the city, hey, what are you doing with that space? So, but it has everything, right? That it started out of nowhere, out of a need, and it grew, and then it fell apart, and then it grew again, and then so it's just one of those things where, and they say business generally takes 5 years to really generate. I'm on, this would be year 6. So
that, you know what, I was just going to pick your brain about that. I've heard some other theories of different timelines. I've heard like the 3 year, the 5 year, the 10 year, and it's overwhelming how many don't make it past like a 10-year mark in general. But you do start to see traction, I think, between that 3 and 5. And if that's the 5 to 6 year mark, that's fantastic to hear. And you've had some highs and lows, some peaks and valleys with that specific project, some very extreme ones. It sounds so similar to other big successes, I would say, in business from other books I've read, even reading one right now, about some major lows and just like mindsets of that creep in during the entrepreneurial journey of like, what am I going to do now? And then something happens, and it certainly like ignites or sparks an idea to go from there. And so, I mean, I've heard, time and time again examples. Now, I guess they're starting to go into short clips more than they are actual reading of books, but nonetheless, I'm still reading some books that are, saying exactly that side of things. That's really great. Well, I'm excited to see how that turns out for you, Jay. And to
me too.
It. Yeah.
Because this year's Fear is going to be, like, for example, everybody points to our promo videos we release every year. We release a short horror film, and then a sizzle reel. I've never spent more than a few $100 on those. This year it's a full production. I am going to be strapped to a chair in the exact same position for probably 3 days, 8 to 12 hours a day. So it's going to be, it's just going to be, this is going to be, imagine Hollywood level production meeting just a local scare experience. That's what it's going to be this year.
Awesome.
Yeah. Looking very forward to making sure that we beat our record of bodily fluid ejection. We keep a board.
Okay. Awesome. I'm excited to see those KPIs.
Perfect. Yeah. I will let you know the second that the season is done.
Awesome. What's been, and I know you spent some time in, we didn't really chat about this ahead of time, and you choose how we go through this, but you spent some time in like tech and ticketing and doing different things along with kind of like, I guess, attached to events and different things there. I know you've had a bit of a journey there. Do you want to share a little bit about that side of things for your business?
Sure.
Story, or share what you can.
No, so it was the ultimate end name of the property was called Incredivent. So it started in 2007. I was very young, and somebody who I had met wanted to build a online ticketing portal for Manitoba Socials. It was actually called Manitoba Socials .ca or .com. And so I started working with him on it. Then I got involved in other things. I went off in 2016. He ended up, Steve was the guy who I originally worked with, who now had run this site that turned into diobo.com. And he got sick and couldn't run his, there's an irony there. So he got sick, couldn't run the business anymore. Unfortunately passed away. And all he really wanted was to not have debt for his family after he passed away. So, cause it was a popular site, but it never quite caught fire.
Right.
So because Steve wasn't from the event space, and they're a very unique type of people to deal with. So got it, kind of sat in the back burner, making the money, not really working on it, but just kind of going, okay, when I do this, it's going to require a lot of work. And then I was doing marketing, and I was like, man, this client work stuff, it's driving me nuts. So nobody can relate to that at all on this call.
It has its moments.
Yeah, it does. It definitely does. So I decided to lean fully into Diobo, which became known as Ticket Tote, which was just kind of like a filler name until I found the perfect name. And then it mutated into Incredivent. And we did events from, tiny little events with a couple tickets sold all the way up to events that had hundreds of thousands of people attending. And then I myself got sick January 2024 and exited Incredivent, which is now which was purchased by a company out in Las Vegas. So
Fantastic.
they now use it for they have a huge, massive enterprise that they needed ticketing for, and they were a client, and I just like messed up on a morphine and everything, made a call, and I'm like, I know I can't possibly pull this off, and we came up with this really like crazy custom hybrid deal thing, so now they're doing it. The great thing was they took all the staff,
Awesome.
nobody, me getting sick and my company having to be shuttered due to sickness did not affect anybody else in a negative way, which was really important to me. And they're all still working with them today, and it seems to be going great. So I'm happy for everybody.
That's awesome. And through negative life thing I know that you had going on there. I realized what you were saying when you were talking about the irony there about original Steve guy helping out with that, and the journey that you've had through running businesses. It seems like a common situation that unfortunately I've heard multiple times where folks have gotten ill while running companies, and either timing wise, just kind of was there to sell the company. I'm sure that's not always the case, but it seems to have kind of worked out in favorable ways most of the time. There's opportunities that just seem to line up well around that from the stories that I've heard. So it's interesting to hear that it's still living on and you were a part of that. And the fact that like that timeline that you just shared there too is interesting, because obviously you were still pursuing like other things and kind of juggling, managing other events, and you kind of come back to that, and then that becomes kind of like a main focus for a bit. And now you're on to the next thing, or next things, I guess, rather. So it's never just one thing at one time. So
and illness has a way of feeding perspective.
yes.
My life has been measured one project at a time, sometimes several projects at the same time, but one project at a time. And I did not realize how toxic my workaholic tendencies were until they almost killed me. And I mean, we're talking almost. I was right there. Had just a random doctor leaving the hospital for the night not walk past my bed in the hallway, I would have died in the hallway at HSC that night. And it was largely caused by how much of a workaholic I was. It really it gave me a lot of perspective. It also gave me the ability to slow down and look at things differently and go, it was funny because my original intent was, once I got healthy again, to come back and build an app and all these sorts of things. And then I realized very quickly, I'm like, I'm not passionate about that. Actually, that's not really what I want to do. So now I'm doing what I'm passionate about, but yeah, no, no, I'm not recommending it to anybody to go and get sick and almost die. But you're right. Of everybody I've ever heard that's gone through a similar thing to me, it was a big turning point for them. It was almost like a flashpoint, where it just everything changes.
And I mean, we saw a lot of change happen quickly. If I want to do like a shout out back to 2020, when we like kind of had to make a change. And I think in those circumstances, when you get sick or when people have those experiences, it forces you to have to look at things differently very quickly. And unfortunately it gets to that point. It's almost like a breaking point, so to say, like you were saying, and causes a change after that. But maybe it's kind of necessary to cause that, because you're so high drive and wanting to have that end result from project to project. Super relatable. Then you have these wake up calls that happen, and then it's like, okay, well, we can readjust.
I often wonder if I would have gotten into the situation had COVID not happened, because for a little perspective, the warehouse burnt down. I lost everything summer 2019, August 2019, and then I'm rebuilding. COVID hits. I'm running an event management and ticketing platform. I have dozens of staff. I just started renovating our office space into a studio. I'm holding major weight, And to get through that, to make it through that, I went to Las Vegas because right when once the restrictions were lifted, I went to Las Vegas because I knew I wasn't going to be able to make a big deal happen here in Winnipeg. It's not the place for it. So I went to Las Vegas with my last few $1,000s that I had to my name. And I just started working the networking events, started, going to every lounge I could think of where I knew business people were going. That led to a FaceTime with Mark Cuban, which was crazy out of nowhere. And then it led to just a whole series of events that led me to massive contracts, which got us back on track. And it just, man, it was a wild ride. 2019, 2020, 2021, a little bit into 2022, were just, I was on survival mode for so long, that it just, you forget that's the mode you're in, and you can come out of it eventually. You just, so it is what it is. But yeah, it was tough, but life is tough, like no matter what, right? Like I know people that they have no entrepreneurial journey in them at all. But they've got their own set of things. I have a friend who they make bank. And she said to me one day, I was at their place, and she said, I have the same problems you have, just with more zeros, right? She's like, your truck breaks down and costs me $900. My plane breaks down, costs me $900,000, right? So, and it's, we all have very similar problems. It's just, they get more amplified the more ambitious you get, right? So.
Absolutely, Ken.
Yeah.
No, good point. So after this happens, now what's life about? What's the journey? What's keeping things going for you, and what are you passionate about?
Well, so I'm in an interesting spot. So, I had the time to, first of all, it took me all of 2024 to heal, to get better. And then pretty much all I could do was my podcast. And now I look back at some of the episodes when I was medicated out of my mind. I'm like, oh no, I can't believe I released that on the internet. My girlfriend is a public health nurse, 20 years in the industry. And she's the most stable person I know, to be honest, in terms of job, lifestyle, very domestic, she has a very, she has what most people would call a dream life. Not like she doesn't have her things or her crosses to bear, but she has a very good life, very stable life. And then she meets me, and it's like, oh my God, stability is not exactly the ground that I stand on all the time. So when I got sick, and I was really like, what do I do when I come out of this? Because now I'm clean slate for the first time in my life. Every journey led to another journey, but now it's like I'm on full pause. So now what do I do? So I started writing because I really thought that our story was unique, Shauna and our story. So I wrote this, The Last First Date. You were at the book release a couple weekends ago. It's fiction, but it's based on how we met. And you can get it on Amazon starting March 15th. And just gotta do the pop.
Absolutely.
And it reminded me how important creativity is to me. It reminded me that I am at my best and my happiest, most importantly, when I am not only, I like business and power, don't get me wrong, but when I'm doing that, but I'm mixing it with the creative juices flowing, and that's something that an IT project just wasn't giving me. And that's why I backed away from doing this new app. And so that's what kind of brought Fear back. So I got now the podcast, writing, and Fear. And Fear is very much a business, but it's also very creative. You got to come up with all these different sets, ways to scare people, ways to entertain people, all that. So that's, that's really where things sit right now is I'm exploring my passions and doing what makes me the happiest, and whether it works or not, we'll find out. I mean, and we're going to find out pretty soon, actually, because the book is, I framed it to Shauna. I said, the book is the riskiest thing because it requires a lot of time, and the average book sells 83 copies in its lifetime. So yeah, that's a hard thing hard pill to swallow. I'm in writing groups, and these writers are like, yeah, oh my God, I made $122 this year. It's the biggest year ever. I'm like, wow, that's not what I'm
Yeah.
used to. So I'm exploring my passions. And I'm fear. I'm good at fear. I know I'm good at fear because the public has told me I'm good at fear. So I feel like it's a pretty safe bet. But I mean, economic uncertainty and all the sorts of things that we're all dealing with these days, it does make every project, it does put a big question mark on every project. So I'm just going to do the best I can, and I'll know by the end of this year whether I'm on the right path or not.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing all that. And we will definitely plug this all day long. Obviously, book release. I'm excited to see you have success with this book and other ones. This is not obvious. I don't think this is going to be your last one. But ultimately, what I hear you talking about too, and I hear this often from other books, post podcasts, is the more failure someone has often, or attempts at doing different things, is often where you find more successes, and taking those calculated risks to some degree, to go and try different things and put yourself out there. The number one thing that we're all afraid of is kind of like that, almost like embarrassment, or like the fear of failure ultimately out there. And I'm sure you've had those moments of doubt, but it doesn't seem like they exist as much anymore at all, with like trying these things and bringing one thing back that kind of burnt to the ground, quite literally. It's so cool to hear, Jay.
Yeah, I know it's a dirty word these days, but science. Entrepreneurship is very much like science. It just requires a certain mindset to think of it that way. You are constantly experimenting, and the beaker's blowing up all the time under pressure, heat and pressure, and eventually you put the right chemicals and everything together, put the right mixture together, and you end up creating something amazing that can help the world, or at least help some people, your employees and your customers and all that. And that's really what business is. And anybody that isn't ready for that, and they should not be an entrepreneur. You have to be ready to experiment and for that beaker to blow up in your face. And maybe you end up turning into the Incredible Hulk, which would be great. But in most cases, you're going to come out of it not even understanding why you feel underwhelmed. And the reason why is because you get pretty addicted to that process. The failure becomes a part of you, and you're like, wow, and you think, it's really funny when Fear 4 happened. I'm like, wow, we did it. We finally did it. I'm going to retire off this thing. And I was like, but why don't I feel like, I thought I'd feel differently. I thought I'd feel like almost like my feet couldn't touch the ground. And and the next day, literally the next day after it was done, we were taking down the set, and I'm talking about what we're going to do for the next year, and all the different, and they're like, man, do you have to keep experimenting with stuff? Like, can't we just do the same thing? Six Pines and all this, they do the same thing every year. Why can't you do that? And I was like, I really like the process of failure, to failure with a purpose, though, not failure just to fail.
Yeah, you want to try different things.
Yep.
Calculated risk, try to improve it, but that comes with risk, right? People may not like it as much. Maybe they do like the thing that was before. That's really cool to hear, Jay. What's been one of the biggest lessons you learned on the entrepreneurial journey?
Biggest lesson I've learned on the entrepreneurial journey. So I would say it's allowing the marketplace to tell you whether you should do something or not. I remember my early entrepreneurial journes. A lot of it was just, I have a good idea. Let me throw a bunch of money in and try it and see what happens. And it fail. And that's failure without purpose, right? Where my journey started to get interesting was when I started to listen to people that had been there before me. Shocking that we should be doing that. Listening to the experts. Oh no. But it's funny. I'm fidgeting a lot because I don't have any buttons to press or anything. Like I do on my
You're used to being the one running it. Yeah. You're all good.
I remember when we did do Fear, you know, like I said, there was a very tight window between coming up with the concept, the first one, and actually implementing. And I just did a very informal, you know, I sent out a blast text message to everybody, and I said, hey, if I did something like this, would you come? You know, very basic. And the majority of people that got back to me said yes. So, and they said yes, and they added something to it. And that's what I learned. I said, you know, if you are going to do something in entrepreneurship, if you're going to get into business, put it out there for people for some research. And if they say yes, great. But if they say yes and they add something to it, their own personal note to it, oh, but you should totally think of this, or I would love to see this, or anything like that, you know that they're interested, but they could be just interested because they know you and they want to support you, but they're interested and they're engaged. They're telling you about the holes in the industry, right? So, for example, everybody kept bringing up that had gone to this one haunted house in the States, that there was this guy with a chainsaw that ran after them. Okay. So I was like, oh, I guess I'm having a guy with a chainsaw, and everybody loved the guy with the chainsaw. And it really, that was probably the first time I ever used market research to
make some decisions.
You had to make some decisions, and boy, what a difference! What a difference!
I think you're definitely right, because sometimes the market's not ready for the idea. The timing's off. The reason that maybe you have to spend 5 or 6 years doing it is just to wait for the market to kind of, you know, catch on. In some cases, other cases, it kind of seemingly, but I think in general, it does take a few years. And maybe that's even the reason why, right? There's a lot of similar mindset folks starting things, but it just takes time to catch up. And you can't.
I had a conversation with a guy one time. I just saw him randomly. If you ever been to the Palomino Club, DJ Alfredo, everybody knows him. Great guy, great DJ. I met up with him one day, ran into him, and he said, you were always ahead of your time in the clubs, which is why a lot of your things didn't work. Like, a lot of my stuff did work, but a lot of it didn't. And I was kind of curious after he said that. That was, I don't know, 2018 or something when he said that to me, maybe a little bit later. And so I went and I looked in the industry, and I was like, oh, it's all happening now. It was just too early. And had I done any market research, I would have known that, and I wouldn't have done that stuff, you know? So, you know, it's really, we can get very excited about our entrepreneurial journeys, right? And we want to create, we want to build. You know, we maybe not all of us are handy enough to build our own saunas in our backyard, but you know, we want to build something, and we can forget there are steps to it. And one of the most important conversations I had, which actually allowed me to do what I'm doing now, was with Alex Hermosi. It was his birthday, and we were all sitting around a table at the venue where he was doing his book release, and I'd brought a Cheesecake Factory for everybody, because he loves dessert, right? We all know this about Alex Hermosi. And we're sitting around, and he said, he's asking me about Incredivent and everything, and he said, well, why do your customers like it? I was like, the framing of the question was so weird, because nobody ever asks it like that. Why do my, I said, hang on a second. And I went down across the studio and I asked my customer, I said, what do you like about my business? And he gave me the most surprising answer ever. He said, you and your team. It wasn't the technology. It wasn't, even though the technology was great and was serving the purpose, it was just me and my team and the service we provided. So I came back, I sat down, and I said, Larry says it's me and my team. And he said, okay, now lean into that. He said, all you've talked about for the last hour is your tech.
Right.
You know, and I was like, oh my God. And all of these bells are going off in my head. Right. So, you know, the journey can be very exciting, but sometimes we need to pump the brakes a bit and really think things through. And I've become a much more methodical thinker over the last few years.
That's very interesting to hear. I think that is great advice for folks in business, to kind of slow it down sometimes, because you get really excited about, launching the idea, whatever. But it's going to take a bit of time, and you got to find out what the real strength is, behind the scenes. So thank you for sharing that, Jay. Now, Actually, and I remember watching that book release too. I know that you were a part of it without diving too far in there, but what was that experience like working for, like, I mean, I guess you kind of had a different, that was a very digital release style book thing.
Yeah.
Your book release is a little bit different for this one, but maybe one day your future book release will be like that. Other
Your
ones,
lips.
perhaps. Yeah.
That experience working with Alex and Layla and Caleb and that whole team. Oh man, I it was just so over the top all the time in every way imaginable. It, you know, I had come to the studio and I said, because Alex is in Vegas, the studio we're working with was in Vegas, and I said to you know, and they were looking for people to use the studio. Remember, I had suggested Alex Ramosi one time, and it just kind of, you know, just one of those conversations that happens and nothing really ever happens with it. And then Larry, the guy that runs the studio, he called me one day. He said, "All right, so we're gonna work with Alex Ramosi." You know, I was like, "Get the hell out of here!" No, you're not. He said, "Yeah, we're doing his next book release." I was like, "What?" Well, I'm looking at his other book sitting on my bookcase, right?
Yeah.
And he said, "Yeah, you just need to jump on a Zoom with him and go through the details." I was like, crazy, right? So I get on with Caleb first, who is like his right hand man, and then get on a Zoom with Alex and Caleb after that. And Alex's approach is so much different than I expected it to be. He, you know, I basically what I had done is I prepared this meeting. I was like, we're talking prepared.
Yeah.
My camera was walls of whiteboard notes, right, ready for this meeting. And
Right.
and he comes into the meeting and he says, "So here's what I'd like to do. Get me as close to it as you can, and whatever you can't do, make sure you tell me so that I can course correct." And I was like, wow, that's such a straightforward way of looking at things.
Right.
And we talked everything through, and I realized there was going to be a ton of customization needed for this event, uh, just based on the way he wanted to run it. And he asked me, he said, "I'm going to ask you, just to be clear, are you up for this? If you're not, that's okay, but I need to know. Like, are
Yeah.
you going to break at any point, or are you going to be able to get through those moments?" And you know, I made I did ruminate on it for a second. I thought, I'm like, should I do this? Because this is going to be way more than I thought it was going to be in terms of work and
Right.
customization. And I kind of like, I just got inside myself for a minute, and I said the thing I say every time something crazy comes up. I said, this is the only time this is going to happen. This is the moment. This is the moment that everybody points to, that they say, this
Right.
is what made me, or this is what broke me, right? I've had a few of those moments in my life, and every time I've leaned into them, it's led to something good. Now there was a whole thing that happened with Amazon technologies and servers going down during the event and all that, but it was nothing on us. There's nothing on my team.
Right.
And Alex has said to me, now we're going to the end of the event, you know, about a week after the event, once it was determined that it wasn't our fault that some of the technology had gone down. He literally broke the internet that day.
I
Amazon
remember
wasn't,
that.
yeah, Amazon wasn't ready for the traffic.
Yeah.
And he said to me, he goes, "The only reason why we are still talking is because of you and your team." And I was like, "Oh man, it's coming. It's all coming full circle."
Very cool.
So yeah, I guess that then there's a secondary lesson there, right? To actually, when you do that research, when you do find out whether you should do something,
Right.
continue to do that research and figure out why people want you to do it, because that's your best
That's great.
indicator as to the direction you should go in.
I love that segue. Bringing everything together there, Jay, like a true podcaster, true storyteller. You come with a lot of experience, Jay. This is really cool to have you on today, to chat about your story, where you've been, yeah, where you're at and where you're going. Excited to continue to follow it. I'm excited to push this out for content and the shorts and stuff that'll come along with this. But for someone that's currently not following, maybe I don't expect you to list all the handles because I think you got a few, but what are the best ways to follow your journey or to get in touch if that's a thing that you want to share? We'll include some links in the actual episode after this. But what would you say is the best way to follow the journey that you're on and the podcast and such?
You know, it's really funny you say that, because I did think of that recently. I said, man, you know, I got these 3 projects going plus all the stuff in the past. So I went to work and I updated my website, projectsbyj.com.
Awesome.
Everything's there. All
Cool.
social, all projects, past. You can watch my crappy TV show from 100 years ago. You can watch the good stuff that's out now with better. You know, the books are there. Everything's there.
Cool.
So that's the link if you want it. And you know, I know you're working a lot with clients these days and everything.
Yep.
And I'm sure you have a lot of people that watch or listen that work with clients. I said earlier that I got frustrated with clients, and I that's why I kind of segued out of it. I actually learned something kind of from Alex, but then as well from these friends I made out of this whole thing with the studio in Vegas. It's called Worry Studios, by the way. If you guys get a chance to check it out, WORRE. Very cool spot to do anything in. But between those conversations, I learned something very important about clients that I will, if I were to ever get into a client-based business, I would definitely do now. And that is when you sit down with a client, never make it about your business ever. They are already there because they understand you offer them a service that they may need.
Right.
Make it all about their business. And then imagine yourself running their business. And all the things you would do if you ran the business. This is going to sound crazy. Send it to them. Say, if I ran your business, this is what I would do. In terms of like what they're trying to hire you to do.
Right.
Don't send them a price. Don't send them anything. Just send them that. And almost always, and I've actually given this advice to a couple of people and they've gone through with it, almost always they get more and they have a better relationship with their clients because the client goes, oh my God, I didn't think of that, or whatever, right? And then then they think to themselves, man, this guy like actually he's really trying to put himself in my shoes. And most small business owners, if you're in medium business, hell, even some more enterprises, that's really all they want someone to do is put themselves in their shoes and give them solutions to their problems. And if you can do it in a way that makes them feel like you're going to be completely invested, right, the relationship is going to be completely different than if you just come in and say, here are my packages, here's what we can offer you, here's what my business can do for you, here's what my team will do for you. If you say, here's what I would do if I was in your a totally different conversation. Makes things a lot easier. That's
great advice, Jay. I think that in a way, I don't know if we word it that way all the time, but I think it's part of the reason sometimes we have success for super relationship focused. This is a great note to take away for us personally, but also listener, if you've made it this far, to take home too. So really appreciate you sharing that. I think that's awesome and fantastic, because on the reverse, I think I would want that in that way too. Like right. It's a great two-way street that could function both ways.
To whoever is editing this on Opus, though, good luck to editing me down into a minute clips.
Shout out to Jeff. He's an amazing part of our team. But Jay, I think we should. Yeah, well, let's wrap it up here, Jay. We could keep chatting, I think, for a long time. This has been great having you on today. Thank you for making time, and we will chat with you on the flip side.
For sure. Thanks, Steve.
Okay. Thanks.
Later.